Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Safer Journeys. I'm your host, Grace McCormick, and today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Tracy Morris, president of IVCC. How are you doing, Dr. Morris?
Fantastic. So excited to be here with you, Grace.
I'm excited for you to be here as well. First of all, congratulations on your appointment. I imagine that it's not easy running an entire university, not university, college. IVCC is, I imagine, a lot of moving parts. What about it made you want to be president in the first place?
It isn't an easy job, but it's not a one-person job either. So I am so fortunate to have an amazing team, and that goes down multiple levels of the institution, from the people who are there opening the front door, to my president's cabinet. There's just a lot of great people here who love the college, and that really truly is why I was so excited to come back. Um, Anyone who's heard me speak anytime over the last year and a half that I've been back has probably heard my story, but I remember as a young child watching my mom graduate with her LPN. Didn't really know what that was at the time. I just knew she was pretty. And so, I didn't realize the amount of work that she had sacrificed as a single mom of three, evenings not sleeping, studying in a closet. You know, she did that to give us a better life. Fast forward about 10 years later, I became a student here at IVCC, and it changed my life. And I came in as a business major, which really was not a good fit, but I found teachers who loved to teach. And so they changed the trajectory of my life, even though I didn't realize it at the time. When I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I thought back to my teachers, and that's where I found the field of education. Was fortunate enough to work here for about 13 years. When I finally came, this was my first job in higher education about 22 years ago, and just had people who believed in me and supported me. And I love the work that we do here. So when the presidency was opened with Dr. Corcoran's retirement, I knew I had to throw my hat in the ring. And through a very long process and a lot of preparation and hard work, was very fortunate to be selected as number 11. So super, very long answer, but super excited to be here. I love this college deeply. I love what we do for our community. And it's truly a privilege to be the president.
And I would say I think we're very lucky to have you. I feel like I mention this every time I interview somebody from IVCC, but I was a student. I graduated in 2021 and I worked in the counseling center. And I think there's a palpable difference, I think, in student atmosphere, largely in part, I think, to not only your leadership and kind of the restructuring of what it means to be a community college, but also kind of I was right in the brunt of the pandemic. I didn't really get the true IVCC experience. And I know that things have changed, but how I guess is today's students' experience different than maybe my experience or the people who were before the pandemic?
It's been evolving, and I think we still are not out of the impact of the pandemic. We're still seeing it, especially in the terms of mental health and helping students to reintegrate to campus. But just before this recording, I had the opportunity to walk someone to a class, and the student life space was full. There was not an open seat available in that student life space at 9:20 in the morning. That is a beautiful thing to see, because I feel like before the pandemic, we were starting to see students come to campus and leave. They weren't really engaging with student activities. They weren't really hanging out on campus that much. It was, I got to get to work. I got to get out of here. And one thing that I think students have kind of learned through the pandemic, especially students your age and younger, is they want to connect. They want to be able to see their friends. And for some, it's a little bit still of a challenge, but that student life space was not that full prior to the pandemic, from what I understand from others. I know it wasn't at the other colleges I worked for. So to see students back is fantastic. And to see them grabbing a cup of coffee and just hanging out with each other, playing ping pong, playing video games, whatever that is, I think that's huge. From the learning perspective, I think that the pandemic actually brought us to start thinking about education a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is, obviously we had to transition to all online, and there's a very small population of people that all online works for. But we've looked at new ways. How can we do a high flex class possibly in the future where it's offered online and in person and blended all kind of in one? And it takes a lot of work on the curriculum side, but we're starting to try to meet the students where they are instead of where we think they should be. And the faculty who are on the cutting edge of this are fantastic. They're trying to figure out, how do we leverage that technology we were forced to use in a way that makes the in-class experience better. So I'm hoping that that will be one of the few positives that came out of it. But right now, it's just great to see students back on campus because it's really lonely without them.
Yeah, I remember looking and being like, "Oh, that ping pong table has my name on it." And then, I looked maybe 3 months later and I was like, "There's nobody here but me." So I think it's really nice to see the school be so full of life, especially in a positive manner where students are excited to be there, they're excited to see their friends, and they're also excited to learn,
Yes.
especially considering IVCC's extensive history. It's fast approaching 100 years of education, which I think is exciting and a little mind-blowing to me. As someone who can't even really conceptualize 100 years. Um, what are some of the principles IVCC was founded on? Do they still apply today? And how are they different, do you think?
Sure. I think when in 1924, when these conversations were starting, it really was more targeted to how do we get that first 2 years of study so that you can go to become a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse. It was very, very transfer oriented, very targeted towards that top tier students. Very small classes, especially in the beginning. But over the years, and then especially in the late 60s, early 70s, when the community college movement took off versus junior college, we've changed and we are much more diverse. So back in the day, we did have some career tech programs that slowly came on board. We started at LP High School on the third floor. And then in the late 60s, the concept of a community college that does transfer, non-transfer, adult education, ESL, like those things started to blossom, which is when we did a referendum and created Illinois Valley Community College as we kind of know it today. And that point in the 60s looked much different than the 1920s. But then, even since then, not only has our buildings changed, but our programs have changed. And so, whether it's the student who's coming back to get the truck driver training certificate, 4 weeks, really intense 4 weeks, that is life changing for our students. Like you can get a really good job. They can barely graduate and they're being swooped up if they're not already employed previously. And they can get a job. And people don't think of that when they think of college. And I'm sure our forefathers didn't really think of that either. But we try to offer so many different things, but we still have our core transfer. That was what we were kind of founded on. So I think learning, I have an intern working with me this semester, and what she's doing right now is she's in a classroom and she's looking, how does the learning environment impact learning? Classrooms are okay, but we have a lot of work to do. And how do we make those classrooms high tech, brighter colors, better lighting, furniture, like all those things weren't conversations in the 1920s. You were fortunate to be there and you kind of took what you had. We really are trying to look at what students need and change our learning environment.
And then for, people who may not know, like me, what is the difference between a junior and a community college?
Uh, Technically, there's probably some small split difference, but back in the early days, they were all called junior colleges. So Joliet Junior College was the first one in the entire nation, and they've kept to that name, junior college, because of the rich history with it. They were founded in 1901. We were the second community college in Illinois.
Oh, wow.
Um, and we were a junior college to start, but Joliet kind of is the first. A lot of colleges, when we got to the point of the 60s, when the Community College Act became a reality, took the words community college to kind of signify that broader scope. Now, yesterday I was looking at the names of all the different schools, and actually quite a few community colleges in the state of Illinois have taken community out of their name because they want to reduce that stigma that some people associate with a community college or a junior college. So, schools like College of DuPage and John A. Logan College and Morton College and Oakton College, they are community colleges. Their names don't necessarily reflect that, but their mission does. So that to me is kind of a little bit of a personal preference for the schools, but at the fundamental core of it, community colleges are much more about that wider range of experiences. So you think your continuing education, non-credit courses, you think adult ed, GED, ESL programs, you think career tech, you think transfer. It's just that broader base is what it comes down to.
And then you mentioned there's a stigma about community colleges. I know as someone who attended a community college, I kind of experienced that, not necessarily intrinsically, but from maybe my friends who went right away to a 4 year. Why do you think there is such a stigma about community colleges when, in all honesty, if I had to do it all over again, I would. You know, I would choose everything exactly the same because I think it really helped me. Why is that, do you think, so difficult to perceive and to understand?
Your experience is very accurate, Grace, and the vast majority of students that we talk to who chose not just IVCC, although that's usually who I talk to, but um, students who choose the community college or have life choose it for them in some cases. True, if they engage with the college, they truly have a great experience. They tell us that they're more prepared when they go to the transfer schools. They tell us that they had great experiences here, whether with their teachers, their classmates, whatever. I think it is more about, I don't know if it's marketing or the way that our story is told in the larger community that still is an issue. There was a whole sitcom based on making fun of the community college, and people thought it was hilarious. I never watched it because at the fundamental core, even if some of the things were funny or were true, it perpetuates that stereotype. So the university stereotype has always been put out as elite. And if you choose, whether it's an Ivy League, whether it's a land grant institution, whatever, as a university or college, it's more elite. And we continue to hear that in our community. And people who say, well, my kid's not going to community college. I think that is not the norm. This year for Decision Day, for example, I saw just as many IVCC shirts as I saw anywhere else, especially, St. Bede, they're wearing them proud. LP, they're wearing them proud. Wherever they're doing those events, students are proud to come here, and we should encourage that. I also think the flip side is it kind of benefits us too, is people say, I don't want to go to college, but I'll go to a community college to get a skill. Yes, they're coming to college, but if that's the hook to get them in the door to upgrade their skills, excellent. We'll bring you in, and don't think of it as, because it's not that traditional sit at a desk 8 to 4 kind of experience. So I think a lot of it is the way it's marketed. It's generations, I mean, hundreds of years of that elitism that people don't consider. But I do know that when I talk to people in the community, professionals, nurses, police officers, teachers, the number of them who have come to IVCC first and are glad that they did is where I choose to tell our story.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, I think it was, the opposite of my parents were like, you're going to IVCC first. Don't even think about anything else. And because they went to IVCC and, and then they transferred to a 4 year, but it's one of those things where that idea of a legacy, I think, really interacts with what it means later on in life when you have to become adaptable.
Right.
You look back, I think, on the hundreds of years of history and you think, well, I can learn from that, but I can also change that in the way I move forward. I think that's really interesting. And I think that's something you kind of model. I will say, as someone just starting out in her career, you are kind of a role model to me. I'm always looking at what you're doing and I'm admiring it greatly from a distance.
Thank
But one thing that particularly impresses me about you is your willingness to be the first to stand up and participate, even if it means standing alone. You took my first day of school picture for IVCC, and I thought you thought I was a student, but you weren't. And you said, "No, I took mine. You have to take yours." And that made it a special occasion, and it made it something that I'm going to remember forever. And I know you have that kind of impact on other people, especially the way you easily include others and you make them feel welcome, like me. And as someone starting out in her career, like I said, sometimes it feels like that kind of confidence can't be learned. It's something that you're just kind of born with, and I might never have it. But is there anything that felt unachievable or insurmountable at the beginning of your career that seems almost like second nature or like too easy now?
Sitting in this chair. But first of all, thank you for all the kind words. That is so sweet. I really try at the core of who I am as a person and as a leader. I really try to be authentic and to never ask my team to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. That's really, really important to me. And so when you say, stepping forward and, even if you're standing alone, I think that is essential for me as a woman, as a leader, as a president. To always be willing to be the first and to stand in front of when people are coming at, if they're upset about something. Like, it is my job to be that shield for my team. And I take that very seriously. But also, I think that being authentic, you said, does it seem like it's overwhelming? Yeah, I've always been a very social person. I've always been a big talker. But had you told me when I was a student here at IVCC that I would be the president, I would have told you were absolutely crazy. Even when I was hired here, I was 28 years old, 29, 30, somewhere in that range. Um, and I just saw these people up on stage and I'm like, I want to be one of those people who makes a difference. Like I remember thinking that it was Kelly Conrad, who was the director of admissions, Renee Prine, who is still a counselor here, Meg Kowalczyk. There was a number of people up on stage and they were talking about all these great things they were doing. I'm like, I want to do that. Um, but I also think that part of that is you have to just get yourself out there. And there have been times where I've done presentations and it's been like talking to a wall, like people were bored out of their mind. My first couple of years of teaching, I think the students were bored out of their minds. You just have to keep trying and keep doing it. I think that's what's really important is, as a young professional, take those risks. It's okay if you don't fail, or if you fail, or if you don't make it the first time, trying again, because it's really easy to say, "Ooh, I'm not going to do that again." So, I don't like to speak from a script as a general rule. I've learned that sometimes I have to. But to be more authentic for myself, I usually do bullet points and try to keep myself focused that way so that I can be myself and be authentic and be natural. But I don't talk for 3 hours when I'm supposed to talk for 15 because that is easy to do. Um, but again, it's really just about being who you are. And if that's not enough, then it might not be the right fit. So when my oldest went away to school, I wrote her a little book of advice. And one of the things I put in there is always be yourself. And if that's not good enough for someone, that it's not the place for you, or something to that effect. And I had even forgotten that I wrote it. And so the day that I interviewed for the presidency, my daughter took a picture of it and sent it to me that day. She said, "Mom, I need you to remember your own advice." I was like, wow. So, at the core of who I am, I try to remember that every day, which means you'll see me in jeans and tennis shoes on Fridays. I know some presidents have said, I would never do that. I'm like, that's who I am at the core. So that confidence comes with age. It comes with knowing yourself and comes with knowing that, you know what, I am good enough. To quote Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live, doggone it, people like me.
I tell myself that every day. Stand in the mirror and I'm like, people will like me. But and then we talk about authenticity a lot as leaders, and as someone who went to school specifically for leadership, I recognize that it's not as easy as it sounds. I think one of the pieces of advice we hear the most is just be yourself. But there's no one tells you how to do that. And I think, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's as someone who worked at IVCC and came back now is in a position of pretty much the utmost authority, how are you writing that line, kind of writing that balance between authenticity and setting those boundaries of, I can't be your peer and your coworker right now. I am technically also your leader.
That's a tough one. That's probably one of the toughest things in all my years of leadership. My first supervisory job, I was the youngest in the office. I had been there the least amount of time. I still would consider those people very, very important to me. I would consider them friends. They were there with me during the best times and the toughest times in my life. But when it was time to work, they all knew that we had those standards set and you have to meet them. And so, it really is. And if they really truly are your friend, they should respect you at that level to not ask you to do something that they wouldn't ask another president. Still struggle with that sometimes in all truth. But I think that for me, do not asking anybody to do anything I wouldn't do, going back to that is really important. So my friend Connie, who worked here, who passed away a number of years ago, gave me a little sign that said, work hard, play hard. We used to talk about that all the time. When it's time to work, we have to be at work. And if someone is not treating students appropriately, if they are not getting their work done, it really truly shouldn't matter who they are. If you're going to treat people equitably, you need to treat them equitably and have high expectations. But also, I think it's really important for me to recognize birthdays, recognize work anniversaries when I'm aware of them, recognize retirements, recognize when an employee loses a member of their family. Like those things, you do that because you're a good human and because it's important. We spend a lot of time here, But I think those individuals still know that I have high expectations that we are going to put the student at the center of our discussions whenever possible. And we are going to treat people with respect and we're going to live by our core values. And if you can do those things, you do have to draw some boundaries about, hang out with people outside, mostly as much just because you don't want people to perceive that they're going to be treated differently. Um, but, so it really is just, one of my colleagues told me that being a president is a lonely job. There's a lot of things that I would love to be able to sit and chat with somebody about and have them help talk it out. And that's not the nature of this role. In those cases, I have other presidents that have been through similar things that, without giving details, you're like, wow, I'm really struggling with this. You can't really just run to a friend and have those conversations when you're in this role. So you find mentors and people who have been there. And I have a group of presidents who have been fantastic. We meet every other month and just talk about how we can work together and how we can support each other. So you just have to think about it a little bit differently.
I think that kind of community is probably one of the most crucial aspects to I think community-based work, right? And I think that's
Mhm.
kind of redundant to say, well, of course community is going to be important. And I think the fields that we work in, while drastically different, I think in some key ways are similar in the sense of we're putting our special populations or the populations we serve at the forefront. And it's that idea of empowerment.
Right.
You empower your students the same way we empower our survivors. Maybe the skills look different, but or the coping skills or the resources look different, but our end goal is to get them to step forward on their own feet. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think it kind of shows the prevalence of or the necessity of, I guess, a listening ear and a helping hand. So I think we as community members should kind of focus on where can we build our own community. And a lot of our organization, speaking about safe journeys, is built around the idea that healing is a journey. And it definitely isn't linear. I can attest to that. But what can you tell us about your journey that, of course, you're willing to share, and how it's affected your life, and the choices that brought you here? Maybe not, to this recording, but here as in life.
It's definitely not linear either, if that helps. I think, it is easy to look and say, oh, look, she had this fast path to become a president. It's not. I think what I see as probably the biggest similarities, as you know, I was a school counselor. So I started as a teacher. I saw people doing great things in the school counseling realm. I went back and got my master's to become a counselor. Um, Before eventually having a boss who believed in me and encouraged me to get my doctoral degree. I think I still come at things a lot as a student services person, as a professional, and saying, what is it that, and I would always say, what is it that student services can do to support the faculty in the classroom? Like we do all the stuff outside of the classroom so that students can focus in the classroom. That informs a lot of what I do in general. Um, as a teacher, I understand the value of what our faculty do in classrooms every day. Benefit of community colleges is faculty are here to teach, not to do research. Put that little plug in there. But I think, it still informs a lot of how I do from that counseling realm of if we give you a fish, you eat today. If we teach you to fish, you eat forever, whatever that quote is. Um, our work here isn't to do it for the students. It's to make sure that we get rid of all that extra noise so they can really focus and reach their goals. So when we think about the food bank, that was one of the most important things for me when I first got here. Crystal Crady said, we have a small closet. It is always being emptied. Our students are hungry. What can we do? I said, what do you need? She said, space. I said, I can get you space. So through those conversations, we now have a fully functioning food bank that helps hundreds of students and their families. Um, Donors gave us a freezer and a refrigerator, so we have fresh food options. We can give meat. We have turkey and fish and chicken, and some employees do vegetables. That informs me because I have been in that situation where we were food insecure. I've been in those situations. And so when you say a nonlinear journey, when you look back, it's pretty darn clear. But in that moment, it's not clear. So we have a responsibility to meet the students where they are, take those extra pressures off whenever we can so that they can really come into the classroom and learn. Um, and I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, because I kind of got on a nonlinear tangent there for a bit, but I think that just being open to the challenge when it's there. And so I know one of the few jobs that I ever interviewed for that I didn't get sticks out to me really well because I thought, I need this job, I need this job. And it was selling textbooks. And I would have been horrible at it. Horrible. I am not a salesperson in general. And so at the time I was just crushed, like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. I don't know why, but this is what I want to do. I could make good money, et cetera, et cetera. And when I didn't get it, I was really kind of devastated. And the reality is our path takes us the way we need to go. We don't always see it. So each job that I've had, while very different, has led me to a different place. And you just have to kind of sit with it. And, even being a compliance officer, I had somebody tell me after the fact, they're like, when I heard you took that job, I thought it was career suicide. And I'm like, really? Yeah, you're leaving a vice president position to go to a compliance officer position. Why would you do that? I said, because it's where I needed to be. Turned out to be one of the greatest experiences I had because I learned a whole nother side of higher ed. But there were people who thought I was crazy for doing that. And that's sad to me. Like you have to just kind of trust that. And it was just what I needed at that point in my career to kind of reinvigorate my commitment to being in higher ed, but also gave me the background to sit in this chair. So nonlinear to me, you have to kind of just sit with those changes. And sometimes you have to take the leap, sometimes you don't, but you have to at least embrace the opportunity.
And I think that's so true in the sense of also upward movement is not always the best movement. I think one of the best things we can do for ourselves is take a step back and reevaluate. Sometimes it feels like all I do is take a step back and reevaluate, but being doing that and that constant reflection, I think, is ultimately extremely worth it, especially if it means, in my case, that I ended up where I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where you have to realize, like, yeah, all the struggle will eventually be worth it. And I guess my final question is if you could pick one piece of advice to share with our audience, what would it be?
Hmm. Wow. Okay, I totally was not ready for that one. Um, I really do think, surround yourself with great people, but always remember that you are one of those great people. And so I saw a post on Facebook just, I think yesterday, where somebody said, ask someone who they love the most and see how long it takes them to name themselves. And I was like, ooh, wow, that's powerful. And, Jamie Crum does a tremendous job in our community with working with young people to help them build self-esteem. I think that very often we're perceived as being either abrupt or brusque or arrogant if we show confidence. And I think that's true of men and women, but in some ways, women leaders, it is even more so. A little bit of a double standard. I think if you can surround yourself with people, not just who tell you you're great, but who help to make you great and you help to make them great, then you understand that you are great and you can do whatever it is that you set your mind to. And so if there was a piece of advice, especially, if it's younger professionals, if it's college students, if somebody is tearing you down, you're not in the right space. And I know the work you do in Safe Journeys is so important in that role. But any kind of relationship, if people are tearing you down or telling you, they can be honest. If I said I wanted to be an opera singer, I hope somebody tells me there is no way in the world that's going to happen because I can't sing. But they should encourage you to say, okay, what would you need to be successful in that? And obviously it would be voice lessons and a new voice. But I think that in general, people who lift you up, who encourage you to do more and not just be complacent, those people have changed my life. Bob Marshall continuously gave me doctoral degree programs and put notes on my desk saying, I want you, you can do more, you can do more, you can be my job someday. And at that point, I didn't even see myself as a vice president. And so he believed in me and continued to push me until I got there. My mom and my husband, when I decided to go back to school, I was working full time. I had a young child at home. And somebody in the community said, why would she go back to school? Her husband makes enough money. And when my friend told me that, I was appalled. Um, and my friend's response was, well, because she's brilliant. That's why. I don't know that that's true, but she stood up for me in that moment when I wasn't there to do it myself. And I've been surrounded by those people who encouraged me, pushed me, were my cheerleaders. So I really work hard to do that for others.
And I think that shows in the work that you're doing now. Even being here, you're demonstrating that you're willing to kind of put in that legwork to make the world a better place. And one of the quotes that I've read that I think really resonates with me personally is there's a difference between honesty and brutal honesty.
Mhm.
In that, with brutal honesty, the people who claim to be brutally honest enjoy the brutality more than the honesty. And I think that's a really powerful thing to recognize, especially when you're doing kind of that reflection of not only yourself, but the people in the world around you. Are these people being honest because they want me to be better, or are these people being honest because they don't feel the greatest about themselves and they need to bring me down to their level?
That's beautiful.
And I
Yep.
think that's made a huge difference for me. Especially doing the work that we do with survivors, you can say, well, are they being honest or are they being hurtful? And what's their priority and what they're telling you?
Mhm.
And I have a wonderful support system. I have the best parents, the best brothers, the best friends, in the world I think anybody could ask for. And I think when you receive that kind of love, it opens yourself up to then distributing that kind of love. And I think for people who maybe struggle with not having that support system yet, I like to say you have to live with yourself for the rest of your life. It's up to you what kind of person you want to live with. So I think if you're struggling with that kind of self boost, almost separate who you are with who you want to be and push yourself towards that option.
Yep.
Do you have any questions for me, I guess? Kind
Yeah.
of to flip the script. I know I'm always the one interviewing, but I guess people sometimes have questions for me. If not, no worries, but I'm
No,
just curious.
I think that, you hit that really on the relationships about, and some people are in those relationships that are not positive. And I've been in that relationship that's not positive. And that's why I think the work that you do is so important, is people may not see the path out. They may not even recognize that the relationship isn't healthy if that's all they've ever known. And so really, truly, helping people to learn to love themselves first, that's a tough, tough, tough lesson. But I think that if we can all do that. So for me, I think for you as a young professional, what are things and that leaders like me can do to help young professionals to continue to grow? Because I know where we have generational differences. So what worked for me at that age wouldn't necessarily work, but how could, my team, how could I help young professionals like you to get to that next level?
I think for me at least, one of the things I've struggled with in the past with jobs, kind of as I've been entering my chosen careers, and that's not the case for, this organization specifically, they've all been wonderful, is having an open mind and treating me like an adult. I think it's difficult for some people, I think, as younger people enter the workforce to take us seriously because they are used to being in positions of authority over us, whether positive or negative. And I think allowing us a seat at the table, not necessarily giving us control by any means, because I know I'm someone who benefits from mentorship and instruction, but allowing us to learn from you, but also take control of ourselves and kind of that autonomy is so important, especially when you take us seriously. So like my supervisor, Aaron, is very, very hands-on in the instructional portion, but allows me to kind of make my own projects and make my own way. And then I come back and I check in with her when I'm ready to move forward. She lets me lead my path, and then she's there as an additional resource, an additional guide. So like most recently, actually, I just gave a Domestic Violence Awareness Month presentation for the IVCC nursing program. I was there a couple days ago, and I made the presentation and I sent it to her and I said, "Will you double check this?" And she said, "Yeah, absolutely. Okay, it looks great." And then I said, "Do you want to be there?" And she was like, "Of course I do." And she came and she just listened. She didn't take over the presentation. She listened and she let me express my expertise and my knowledge. And then afterwards, I said, "Okay, so what can I work on? What can I do better?" And then we have that conversation from there. But I think
Mhm.
allowing us, and it seems overly simple to say, allow us to be grown-ups. But I think, especially, being 23 and having just graduated college, it's a little different than like being 28 to 30 and entering that kind of career space. Because I'm not as established as I'd like to be in all aspects of my life. I'm still figuring it out because I'm so used to other people telling me what to do because I'm in school. Or, and I mentioned this with Hannah and Ashley, coming back to IVCC in a different capacity where people are no longer my supervisors, but my peers. They're doing really well with that. I necessarily am still kind of struggling because I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for you to tell me what to do. Never mind, I tell me what to do. So kind of navigating those relationships is it's silly because it's funny, but it's also difficult because I'm not quite sure where to step. So I think
Mhm.
honestly just letting us lead ourselves with assisted guidance on the way, but taking our ideas seriously, letting us speak in the meetings, letting us prove ourselves, I think is probably one of the most beneficial things someone further along in their career path could do, as well as modeling what it means to kind of be that secure and confident person like I was talking about earlier. Like you know where you're supposed to be and you know what you're doing, or at least you're doing a really good job of acting like you are.
Sometimes you
Although
have
I
to
do
fake it
believe
till you make it.
I do believe it's genuine. Kind of being that model and then allowing us to kind of create our own person, I think is really important.
And I think, the value of mentors is critical. And I think that is a good thing for me to remember because I am a doer. I like to get things done. And I have to sometimes step back and say, I need to let someone else do this. I'm sure it's especially hard for Mark Rysbowski because I've done that job. So I really try to say, okay, what do you want to do instead of what I think we need to do, or give guidance and then let them go with it. And that's always a struggle. As a president, I can't have my hand in everything, and I shouldn't. I have amazing people here who come up with things that are even better than I may have come up with. So yeah, we're all learning. We're all trying to do that together. And sometimes it takes you or, the younger professional to say, hey, can I have a chance to do that? And to let them come up and see, and then just be there to catch them if they fall, but also say, hey, this was really great. And here's where you could improve. So I think that's how we all just help each other.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm very excited to kind of see what our audience has to say in response to what I've learned. Where can people find you if they're interested in learning more about you or IBCC or what you're up to?
Well, we are up in the president's office, and most people can never find us in all truth. We're up in Building C, right where the mural is. If you go right past the mural on the upstairs, we're on the left. Have a couple little stickers on the window so that people know that that's where we're at. But I think that I'm trying to be out and walk around campus. So if anyone would happen to see me, I'm usually wearing my name tag. If anybody's listened to it, please stop and say hello. Say that you heard this podcast. Just, I always like to hear from students. Our students help to guide our mission, vision, and values this time around. We asked students to come in. We gave them a free t-shirt at the time to give us some feedback. But what was really interesting is the voice of the students was very similar to the voice of our employees. So please remember that we are human. Anybody that works here, we're here to help you. So I hope that whether somebody comes just for a summer class before they go away to school, they're coming back as a returning adult, they're working on their GED, all of those are such an important part of what we do. And it's a privilege to be here. I love it. So thank you for having me, Grace.
Thanks for being here. Make sure you follow IVCC on Facebook and Instagram at IVCC Eagles. Make sure you're following Safe Journeys, both our podcast page and our regular page at safe.journeys and at safer, dot journeys dot podcast. Until next time, I am Grace McCormick with